Social media can be a great way to connect with friends and family, but do you really know what your child is doing online? The DEA warns that drug networks are increasingly using these platforms to find new customers, and it's also become a tool for sex traffickers. Now, the FBI is sounding the alarm about a rise in violent online networks targeting kids. Today's guest on Grieving Out Loud, unfortunately, knows about these dangers all too well.
She walked out the door. I was at my computer because I worked from home. And she said, "Bye, Mom." And I said, wait. And I went out there and I walked halfway down the stairs and we met on the stairs. And I just said, "Okay, baby, I love you. Be safe." And she said, "I love you, Mom." And she walked out. And I had no idea that was going to be the last time I would ever see her.
Since the death of her 17-year-old daughter, Juliana Arnold has been trying to uncover what exactly happened in the hours leading up to her death. What she's found is disturbing, from her daughter meeting someone on social media to then having sex with a much older man and ultimately dying from fentanyl poisoning. Juliana is sharing her very difficult story to warn parents about the dangers, all while urging social media companies to do more to protect kids.
Any other industry, cars are regulated, we have seatbelts, toys, anything that's harmful for children, immediately we have regulations, and yet not since 1996 has there been any legislation regulating the internet.
Well, Juliana, it was a pleasure to meet you in Washington, D.C., even though I always say when I meet other parents who've lost a child to fentanyl poisoning, I hate it that we meet because we both lost children. But It was interesting because we were at a conference where the acting head of the DEA was talking, and we both got up to talk about our stories and what needs to be done. We both lost daughters, and I'm very sorry for your loss.
No, you too. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Juliana is the proud mother of 2 girls. Her oldest daughter, Olivia, is now in college, and her younger child, Coco, died just 2 weeks after her 17th birthday. Tell me what was going on with her, what was happening around her 17th birthday.
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I see this progression from when she was younger. Coco was vivid, lively, ball of the ball, always out there, making jokes, cracking jokes, having fun. But then there was also this very sensitive side of her that was really empathetic. And, she'd see a homeless person on the street and she would go up and give them something, or she would be reading about, trafficking of girls, or those type of issues were really, really front and center. Even when she was 7 or 8, I found her, she got a hold of my iPad and was watching a video of orphans in Bulgaria. And she's like, "Mom, I just don't understand why there has to be so much suffering." So that really affected her.
Juliana says that over the years, her daughter's liveliness started to get squashed. By the time Coco was 17, she battled anxiety and depression, along with other issues.
She was diagnosed with ADD, but not until her 13th birthday, which was a bit of a struggle for us, just because that's fairly late to be diagnosed. I think eventually that just caused some problems for her in school, primarily.
It's so interesting how you're describing her, because you could be describing my daughter. Well, she was just very outgoing, very vivacious, very dramatic, but also had this huge sensitive side, this big heart.
Yeah.
Was also diagnosed, and I don't know if it was a correct diagnosis, but later in her teen years when we started having trouble, diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, probably not ADHD, but
exactly.
ADD. So very similar personality type.
You know what, Angela? And I just find this a lot. I talk to a lot of parents. I've gotten involved in a number of different organizations and had conversations and been in grief groups. And, I'm sure as you have. And when I really feel that there's more and more, I'm finding that potentially there's a profile, of kids that are just vulnerable online and vulnerable to these types of things. My older daughter had no problem. She got good grades. She went to a great college. Everything was smooth. They were 18 months apart. Had the same exact childhood because they were so close in age. They experienced everything together. And yet, such 2 totally radically different outcomes.
I completely understand because my other kids are none of the same things. It was not the same. I mean, and they're doing fine. They went to college, went on, graduated, to have jobs. I mean, the things you're supposed to do, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
That's why I always say that this horrible, tragic thing happened to us, and society is so quickly to blame parenting. But then I said from the beginning, like, if you blame parenting, how can you explain my other kids? So they're all parented in basically the same way. It's not like we drastically changed as parents between the children that we had. And it is just something, I think, they're set up. It's something about their temperament, their personalities, their genetics, and then the availability and what's going on in society now, where, 20 years ago, they wouldn't be dead.
No, definitely not. My daughter probably wouldn't even been searching for any kind of relief or, help, because I don't think it would have escalated like it did. And I think that in large part for her, because she did have an issue with her social media use, and it was an issue for us in the household. She just wasn't able to contain that and saw a lot of stuff that I don't think she was supposed to see, and it didn't resonate well with her.
Juliana says that as Coco spent more time on social media, she saw less of that energetic, fun-loving side of her daughter. Coco also came of age during a time when there was less awareness about the possible connection between social media use and mental health struggles.
Because she was of that age where, like, let's say 2015, without when like Instagram came on, she was 10, okay? And I think that was around the time that her father bought her an iPhone. And that was not my choice. I didn't want that, but sometimes that happened. And I think I saw her, grow up, but living half of that through, social media and what everyone else was doing. And it really affected her at this time where they're so vulnerable. I mean, when they're middle school, it's just the age where they're just trying to figure out, like, it's so awkward. It's so hard. It's like, it's just trying to relate. And how am I going to do it? And when I go to high school and like all these things, and then that just gets blown up, online. And so I think she became a prisoner to that, and so whether it was inappropriate content or being skinny or, feeling like you look like someone else or your life was as good as someone else's or you got invited to that party or you didn't, all of these things I think had an effect on her overall mental health, and also COVID, and then the amount of time that she more and more wanted to spend on social media rather than doing other things. And she really slowly just stopped doing activities that she loved, track, gymnastics. She loved tumbling. She was a daredevil, so she just loved tumbling.
Yeah, my daughter was a gymnast too.
Really? She just loved, that's the one thing that she really loved. She quit any music stuff that she was doing, so, and then just was getting more and more, I think, isolated, and I'm spending more time in her room. And this was like a slow burn that during COVID really kind of just, because we didn't have any way to draw her out, right? We didn't have the ability to say, let's go do this or let's go do that, So I think it really affected her. It did.
Yeah. And I think also I always talk about my daughter and her gymnastics, and she was an award-winning gymnast.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
But also that personality trait of being a risk taker, being willing to take risks. And that can lead you to take risks in trying drugs, that personality trait. So
Exactly.
I hear what you're saying about, I always say, I saw my kids go through a lot on social media, and in some cases it was being left out of something. And when you and I were growing up, we could be left out of something. We wouldn't even know it. And those things can really hurt when you're young like that, in middle school especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough world for these kids. And while they seem to have everything on one hand, like so many things that we didn't have growing up, right? Because of social media and the way the social structures are now, and then you throw something isolating like COVID on top of it, it has really changed the world.
It really has. It really has. And, I think that was exactly it. Our kids were in pain in some way or another, and they were looking for something to make them feel better. You know what I mean? That was it. It's simple. It's not really that difficult. You can understand if you're in pain, you have a hole inside, or you feel like something, you're just looking to get some relief, I think. And it's so easy for them too. Like, it's so easy to get any of these, drugs, whether they're pills or they're cannabis. And that's just what makes it so dangerous.
A dangerous combination that Juliana found out about firsthand when she discovered that Coco was smoking marijuana. She became concerned, especially knowing how it can affect the developing brain.
she said it was for her anxiety. So we were having constant conversations about that. She goes, Mom, it just really helps. When I said, I know, but like, it's really not a good, to be using this type of substance right now at your age and what it can do to you mentally. It's really not good. And the marijuana that's out there now is so much stronger. It's not even the same, thing. I mean, and, studies are showing more and more that it can lead to psychosis in teenagers if they do it enough regularly for a number of years,
Right.
So we were dealing with that, and we had a program an outpatient program that I had her go to because I just wanted her to learn and self-understand that, what was going on and how she could use other ways to calm herself down and to, ease her anxiety.
Even with all the challenges, Juliana and her daughter stayed close. They loved their girls' days, grabbing food, going shopping, and enjoying time together.
She was a huge thrifter. We would spend hours, and like our favorite thing to do was like go thrifting and then go to lunch, and she'd spend hours in there, just like we end up with this huge bag of stuff. And I'm like, what are you going to do with that? Like half of it's junk. She's no, it's not, Mom. And she'd go home with this big bag and strew it all over her bedroom floor and then start cutting it up and doing things and sewing and create these outfits that, I don't know, they looked great on her. My other daughter and I were like, oh my God, that would look so horrible on me. But she just had this way and she just loved doing it. And that was also one of her passions, was kind of fashion and, thrifting. And she really liked the idea of taking something that was not usable and then making it into something that was beautiful. So for her, that was kind of meaningful.
Thrifting. That's what Coco told her mom she was going to do on a snowy Wednesday when school was canceled. But little did Juliana know that her daughter had different plans.
She asked me if she could go thrifting with her friend Sophie. And I said, sure, yeah, that sounds great. That's a good plan, for today. It's not that bad. And she goes, yeah, we're just going to take the train one town over. And I said, terrific. I knew what thrift place they were going to. It was we were in Larchmont, and this was in New Rochelle, which is just one train stop away in Westchester, New York. In any case, she walked out the door. I was at my computer because I worked from home. And she said, bye, Mom. And I said, wait. And I went out there and I walked halfway down the stairs and we met on the stairs. And then she said, okay, baby, I love you. Be safe. And she said, I love you, Mom. And she walked out. And I had no idea that was going to be the last time I would ever see her.
Throughout that day, Juliana communicated with her daughter several times. Coco told her that she was going to go to her friend Sophie's house after thrifting, so her mom could pick her up there. Everything seemed normal until later that evening.
The evening came and she wasn't answering her phone. She wasn't picking up texts. And I was like, what is going on? This is strange. So after a bit of time, I called the mom of her friend that she was with. And she said, I'm sorry, Juliana, but, Coco wasn't with us at all today. We went to the city to visit, relatives. We were not around. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I just was like, oh my goodness. So she went to go talk to her daughter. And Sophie said, I don't know where she is. I didn't hear from her today. So I knew something was up. So after some time passed, I finally called the police and had the police come to the house. And they did a whole report and put an APB and all of that. And said, okay, we'll have detectives on this in the morning, but we're actively looking for her in Westchester County.
After the police left, Juliana says it was about midnight. She couldn't wait until morning for more law enforcement to start searching for her daughter, so she started to take matters into her own hands.
I didn't know what to do with myself. I was
out of your mind. I bet you were out of your mind.
And I was home alone. And I walked into her room just to kind of get a feeling of like, would I find something? Would it give me some hint? And she had her computer open on her bed. So I went and looked on her computer, and there was it's like just there, an Instagram conversation she was having with someone, DMing, direct messaging. And she had been using that, I guess, the computer, because she had broken her phone and she had just gotten a phone the night before. So we were just like setting it up and everything. So I read through these conversations that she was having with this man. He was about a 23-year-old young man. And it was kind of like flirting, like he had approached her on Instagram and was kind of like flirting with her, almost like he was grooming her. Like he pretended to be her friend and he was pretending to have a conversation like they were equal, like they were, friends. And so I saw that the conversation escalate over a couple of days. And then he said, well, why don't you just try, a Percocet for your anxiety? It'll really help. And she goes, yeah, well, I have some, you can come down here and I can give you them. And she said, well, I've heard a lot of bad things because Coco and I had discussions about the selling of drugs online and specifically fentanyl.
Oh.
Because I had heard about it and I knew Coco was at risk because she was such a risk taker and I knew she was going to experiment. And so I just wanted to let her know that it wasn't just experimenting. I mean, this is deadly and people are dying. So she asked him, she goes, I heard there's a lot of bad pills out there. Like, are you sure? You promise? And he goes, no, I promise. And he sent her a picture of the pills. He says, they're good, definitely come on down and they're cheap. So she went down there. She went down to the Bronx. He lured her down there and sent her address. So I found the address on her computer. So I took screenshots of all of this, sent it to the local police and said, hey, I think I know where she might be. Can you guys go? Like, are we going? And they said, I'm sorry, but we can't. It's not in our jurisdiction. That's in the city and we can't go there. The detectives will be on it first thing tomorrow morning. And I said, well, we may not have that much time. Like, I don't, where she is. So I'm going down there. And they're like, they advised me not to. They said it was dangerous. I shouldn't go down there. I had no idea where I was going, by the way. Like,
well, of course you're going. No one's going to stop you from going to try to find your child. I mean,
no.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mama Bear. I was like, are you kidding me? I won't use the word and the language that he used with them. But I was like, I'm going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said, well, no matter what you say, I'm going. And so I got in my car by myself and I started driving there, and I had the address and I was just following my GPS trying to get there. And then I finally landed at this location. It was dark and, I really didn't know what I was getting into. And I got out of my car and I was looking for this address and I was screaming in the street, her name, just so maybe if she was around there, she could find me. And this address that he had given her was not a real address. It wasn't like a building there for that number. But she had sent her friend that she had supposedly was with she texted a picture she took in the hallway of a building. And she said, I'm waiting in the hallway in the Bronx. And that was it, with a little halo emoji. Sophie didn't know where she was. So I looked at the picture because Sophie had sent it to me and I saw this building and I'm like, oh, there's brick, there's metal. That looks like that could be a match. And it was like right next to where that address would have been. So I got two guys to let me into the building. It was about 2:00 in the morning at this time. And I barely got in because they didn't speak very good English. And my Spanish is not my forte. So I tried to do the best I could, but they got me in. And I tried to ask them, have you seen this young girl? And I showed them a picture and they're like, no. And I said, do you know anything about drugs in the building? And they're like, oh, maybe like the 3rd or 4th floor. That's all they would say. So I was up and down the building. I went up the stairwell, down the stairwell, all along, the corridors, screaming her name, just hoping to find her. And then finally the police from my local police called me. They said, where are you? Are you okay? And I said, I'm down here in the building. Like, I'm in the building searching for her. And they're like, okay, call NYPD. So I guess because I was in the NYPD jurisdiction, they would come down. So 2 cops came down. I showed them the picture. I kind of validated that this, in fact, was the building because I showed them the match with the picture in the stairwell. And we all just started calling the super of the building, checking to see if we couldn't get into camera footage. And then we just knocked on everyone's doors. And, most people didn't come out. Most people wouldn't, but some did. And usually they were women with like a young kid in tow, like saying, Mama, what's going on? Or Grandma, what's going on? Why is someone knocking at the door? And they said they had seen my daughter that day. But when I showed him a picture of the other guy, because I had his Instagram profile, they're like, no, we don't know him. No. Like, we don't know him. And I was like, this is just odd. And then the super said he had seen her in the stairwell of the building that day. And he didn't want to talk about the other guy. He didn't know anything, So anyway, that's kind of an aside. So about 5:30 or 6:00 in the morning, I'm still with the cops. We've come up with nothing. And they're like, okay, you really need to go home. The detectives and the FBI are going to be on this first thing. They start at 7. So there's really nothing we can do. So I was sitting there in my car going, okay, what can I do? What should I do? And then I was like, okay, I guess I just have to go home and then see what the next steps are. So that's what I did. And little to my knowledge, it turned out that Coco's body was found 2 streets over, same block, but 2 streets over in another gentleman's apartment, an older man's apartment. I was that close to finding her.
Coco died on March 10th, 2022 at just 17 years old. 3 years later, Juliana still has so many unanswered questions, and her daughter's death remains an open investigation.
As one of the nation's strongest financial organizations, First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card have the strength to do good. We support nearly 700 organizations and nonprofits. Our employees give more than 30,000 volunteer hours annually. And we are continually seeking ways to make South Dakota an even better place to live. It's the Premier way. First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card.
She was found in a gentleman's apartment. He was in his 50s, and he had a story that he told the police. I mean, I obviously didn't speak with him, that he was on the streets late at night, and a woman named Kitty was there, and she had Coco with her, and said, this girl needs a place to stay tonight. She doesn't have anywhere to go. Can you take her? And so Kitty and Coco went up to this guy's apartment, I guess, and then Kitty left, and he said that he had sex with my daughter. He's a 50-something-year-old man. And that afterwards she went in the bathroom and she must have, taken something. And this is his story. Or the next morning she took something. He had a crazy, crazy story. So he called in her death at 6 p.m. the next day.
Oh my God.
That whole day went by.
So you all night, you're searching in a building nearby. You go home at 6 a.m. and then 6 that night. So basically full 24 hours or however long, even longer, had gone by, and he calls in her death.
He calls in her death. And we had had cops all on the streets all around. This was near Fordham University.
Despite the fact that Coco died in his apartment, and he said that he had sex with the 17-year-old, Juliana says he has never been charged with any crime.
He could not be charged with statutory rape because, unlike California, in New York, the age is 17, not 18. So she was just a couple weeks after her 17th birthday. And because she wasn't alive to say that he raped me, they could not take just the fact that they had sex because they didn't know if it was consensual or not. And I know my daughter, and there's a lot of risks she would take. That was not one of them.
So have you been able to piece together, was that the guy on Instagram pretending to be 23?
No.
I mean,
no. The guy on Instagram was 23. He was involved. He also had a story. And his story was that Coco came to him for the pills. They hung out a little bit. She got upset because he made her wait in the hallway. She created a ruckus and she came to him, and he said she was already wasted when she came to him. And so he didn't sell her any pills, and that he asked his friend Kitty to take her out of the building because she was causing a scene. That was his story. Well, I expected when I got Coco's toxicology report back from, the medical examiner, that I would find something else in her system that would have made her that intoxicated for that story to be true. There was nothing. She was on an antidepressant that she had in her system, and I had administered that. She was on ADD medication, which I had administered that morning when she left the house, as I always did, and nothing else except fentanyl.
And so it sounds to me, as I hear your story, this sounds to me like a case of a young girl being drugged and sex trafficked. That's what it sounds like.
Right. And that's what, a lot of what was in my mind. So I found out 11 o'clock that night. I guess I had dozed off because I hadn't slept at all. The police knocked on the door and I got a call and I went down and I knew. And they said, go sit down. And we went into the living room and I just looked at her and I just fell to the floor. And then they told me the news that she was no longer alive. And I can't even, I know you understand this, but it's just the pain is inexplicable.
Yeah, you can't put the pain into words, Juliana. I don't think any of us can, because there are no words to describe the depths of that pain.
There are no words. And they didn't give me a lot of details. Even one said, well, you may not want all the details. And I'm not that type of person.
Well, it's not this makes me mad because it's not up to law enforcement to decide whether a mother, especially to mothers and not as much to fathers, but if a mother can handle the information. I encountered that myself. I've had actually investigators still have my daughter's phone, and I've had people say to me, you probably can't handle what's on that phone. And I'm like, you don't get to decide that for me. I am an adult woman. I get to decide. It makes me really angry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's how I felt. So, no, obviously I was completely out of it. And then when I got the detective, I spoke to a detective on the phone that next day, and he was asking me some questions. And, I didn't really get a lot of information out of him. He was just more asking me questions. And I guess I was in such a daze, I just assumed that he was doing his job. And for me, the way she was found would have required an investigation as to why was she there and what happened
Yes.
between her and this older man, especially that he said he was had sex with her. I found out later that detective never called it a crime scene, never got any forensic evidence, didn't check the cameras of either building, and just kind of chalked it up to another one bites the dust, another junkie bites the dust. She was sitting there in the Bronx because the older man, I guess, was known to be a user. And in that neighborhood, it's one of the highest rates for overdose deaths in the country almost, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that part of the Bronx. And I didn't know where she was going anyway, but I didn't know that.
Well, how tragic that her life was just disregarded like that. This detective made a call
Totally.
to just...
And I didn't find that out until about 4 months later when the medical examiner had told me a number of times, and I didn't pick up on it, like, are you going to hire an attorney? Are you going to hire an attorney? Like, at first I thought maybe they could just get him for statutory rape, but then I learned about the age in New York State. And then I was like, what is she trying? And then finally people were telling me, like, maybe you should get a lawyer just to really have someone on your side that's really looking into what's going on. Because that detective had immediately given my daughter's case to what they called the narcotic squad or the overdose squad in New York City, which is really just basically dealing with these fentanyl deaths. So they're not interested in what happened on the ground and all that. They're interested in how to make the connection to a larger distributor, to then the cartel, so they can start really, approaching it from that aspect. And I had told them what happened and they knew it was wrong. And I know the first guy was lying. I know the second guy was lying, but we don't have enough on him to do anything. So that's kind of what happened. So unfortunately, they didn't have the camera footage. They didn't have the forensic evidence. They did have a rape kit, which they never run because they said there wasn't enough evidence to justify that. So here I am sitting there wanting to get, I'm trying to connect the dots of what happened to my daughter months and months and months. I will wake up. I will go to sleep every moment of every day. I was just trying to picture in my mind what happened that day. And the more information I got, the more I could start to pull things together. But it didn't make a difference because the police weren't doing anything about it. And my lawyer, had tried. When she did it, she did get me a lot more information. And then there was an investigative reporter who wanted to do a piece on it a little over a year later. And I had not wanted to see the file that we had requested from the police. I said, my lawyer should see it. She didn't know if I wanted to see it. And at that time, I thought, okay, that's fine. You take a look at it. You know what you're doing. This investigative reporter, I gave him access to see the file. And through him, I found out a lot of information about what happened that night and what was unanswered. But the cameras would have made a huge difference if they had had the footage, because they would have known when they left, when they came, who was with her, who left. They would have had all that information. And they would have had, if they had taken forensic evidence, they would have been able to analyze that and to see, was it just one guy? Was it two guys? Was it, we didn't know, what I mean, what really happened.
Juliana says the lack of information and investigation left her feeling helpless and powerless. She was also frustrated with the fact that the Instagram profile of the man Coco was communicating with was still active, despite the messages showing he was willing to sell illicit drugs.
He allowed me to follow him, which I was shocked. I was following his posts. His posts were drugs, alcohol, women, wads of $100 cash, flashing them around, guns. This is a profile that's on Instagram, And I kept on asking the police. They're like, well, we're working on it. We're working on it. Why should it take so long? He was going to do it to someone else.
Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. 3 years later, that man still has not been charged in Coco's death. And while his original Instagram profile was shut down, Juliana says that she recently found out that he's still active on social media.
I just did a random search and I found another profile that was a little bit different name, but the picture was him. He was back on Instagram doing his thing, even though the police knew, he was a drug dealer, but although they couldn't catch him.
Juliana is also frustrated that despite flagging concerning posts, social media platforms have not taken action. She says they ignored her messages and never responded.
So you really blame the tool that was used, Instagram, for what happened to your daughter?
I do, because she would have had access. I mean, he approached her, he provided her the drug. And, these people, they have signs of what they're using. They use special emojis that we all know about. DEA says they know about them, the federal FBI knows, law enforcement knows. We all know there's certain ways, there's pictures, there's all sorts of stuff that the social media companies could flag to take content down or take those people that are doing criminal activities online. But they choose to not do that, and they don't take down these profiles, and they're not spending the resources they need to spend to make their platform safe.
This has turned into a much bigger cause for you, actually beyond even your daughter, even though you're personally affected by this, because I know you've been working hard to reach these leaders of social media, the Mark Zuckerbergs and Snapchat executives and all those people, yes, and to try to change things in this country. Tell me a little bit about those efforts.
Yeah, so I was so enraged by the situation and so enraged by the content that I had seen online. And I was always like, I can't believe that we're allowing this to happen. Like, there's no rule of law. How can this be out there? I said, if someone was selling drugs on the street corner, the police would have picked them up and they would be in jail. But instead, drug dealers hide behind their social media accounts and they're invisible. And yet they're targeting kids and they're able to communicate with them and they're able to set it up that they could just drop off the drugs at your house. And parents have no idea. So it's basically in your living room. It's like having a drug dealer in your living room.
To try to hold social media companies accountable, Juliana became involved with an organization called Fair Play for Kids, which advocates for safer online spaces.
There was a group of parents that had lost their children to social media harm. So not only fentanyl, but the choking challenge, the blackout challenge, suicide due to cyberbullying, sextortion, CSAM, the illicit photographs. And then now with AI, it's just the pornography that's being put out there, the Nudify apps. I mean, it's just exploded since AI. I mean, it's gotten even worse. So we're just on this trajectory that it's just out of control. So I got involved. And there's a legislation that we backed, which is called the Kids Online Safety Act. And the Kids Online Safety Act really provides parents and children with the tools and the safeguards they need to make their online experiences safe. It requires the media companies to take a duty of care of the content that's on their platform, which really means, it's more about the design of the platforms rather than the third-party content because of the algorithms. And so the way that they're producing their products is harmful to children, and they know that. And a lot of these whistleblowers had shed light on that they know that the way it's addictive. They know the features that they use are going to keep kids online more and more and more. And that's what they want, because if they keep kids online, they get more advertisers and they make more money.
Right. It's about money. And you actually came face to face with Mark Zuckerberg in a hearing at Capitol Hill, right?
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Well, we were all there for the hearing. This is the first kind of hearing of that sort. I mean, they've been having hearings on this issue, I think, since 2020. I mean, it's not new. And this is, I think, the fifth time they've asked those executives to testify. And they had to subpoena Zuckerberg to show up because he was refusing to show up. So that just tells you how much they care about this issue. So we all showed up. We all had photographs of our children. It was quite the scene. I think, and it made a statement. So we were listening to the testimonies of the social media executives. There were social media executives there from the 5 largest social media groups, including Snap, Twitter/X, Meta, obviously Zuckerberg, and then I think it was TikTok president was there as well. And then another platform, Discord. And them talk about all these things that they're doing, all these things that they do to take care of children and make their platform safe. But then when they were questioned by, the senators on the committee, that had proof from whistleblowers that they knew about it, and there was proof that they knew about it. There's proof that they knew what they were doing were harmful, but they didn't prioritize it. They said, no, other things are more important. We can't spend money on that right now. And then Senator Hawley cornered Zuckerberg and said, well, if you're doing so much, why don't you turn around and apologize to these parents? They're here, parents that lost their kids to social media harms. And he turned around and his words were just meaningless. He took no responsibility, for the platforms and what they did. He just made excuses. And his sorry was just so pathetic. I'm sorry, in my opinion. It was not heartfelt. It is not meaningful. It just left us even more and more upset and more angry that someone like this that is so powerful, has so much control over this world, and yet is so callous.
Right.
He has his own children. I mean, it was just, we could not believe it. We were in disbelief, and that just made our mission that much more important.
Unfortunately, Juliana and her group haven't had any luck getting the Kids Online Safety Act passed. She's made multiple trips to Washington, D.C. to meet with lawmakers. And while the bill passed overwhelmingly in the Senate last fall, it still has not become law.
This is a bipartisan issue. We have Republicans and Democrats that want to protect our kids. Everyone's a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, something, And so we had to go to the House then because the House had to also approve it. And unfortunately, it got blocked in the House by the Speaker and eventually went nowhere, and just the end of the year it timed out, and we kept on continuing. There was a lot of pressure. COSA is a bill that's sponsored initially by Senator Blumenthal, who's a Dem from, Connecticut, and Senator Blackthorn, a Republican from Tennessee. So quite different, opposite sides of the country, very different, but they were in complete agreement and still are in complete agreement. And they were pressing as hard as they could. They could not get, the Speaker to budge.
And what do you think now? I noticed, these tech billionaires seem to have so much influence in Washington at the moment. And even we saw Zuckerberg and others at the inauguration, and they paid, big bucks to help fund the inauguration. And is that to try to get their agenda so they don't have to change? And why are they so resistant to this change? I mean, I know it's about money, right? But is that it? And do you think that it can go anywhere in today's political climate with what I just mentioned about their influence?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And that's been something that we have been very concerned with, seeing what happens. Because basically, after the election, we really didn't know what to expect. We really didn't know what the new cabinet would look like. We didn't know what we were going to get, obviously. So we didn't know where we would stand and how much support we would have on this. But right before, when we were still trying to get this bill passed at the very end of the year, I mean, we're talking like near the 25th, near Christmas, we got the approval of Elon Musk. Elon Musk, they made some changes to the bill. They tweaked it a little bit, and we got X's and Elon Musk's approval. We also got Donald Trump Jr.'s approval. And we thought getting those endorsements would really mean something, and maybe we might get it somewhere, but it really didn't go anywhere. So this is what concerns us now, because we really don't know. I mean, we found out, and it's been in the newspaper, in the fall, Zuckerberg committed $25 billion to the state of Louisiana to build a data center there. Well, both Speaker Johnson and Leader Scalise are both from the state of Louisiana. So nice coincidence there. So we don't know. We don't know. I don't want to say yes definitively, but it sounds like this is something where they have had, and they have also, just to be honest, they have never paid more and spent more on lobbying in DC. And senators will tell us we have been bombarded. I think collectively they spent $61 million last year, the most they had ever spent on lobbying to try to put down these bills or any legislation that would regulate them. Regulate the product that they're putting out there, that they are designing. Any other industry. Cars are regulated. We have seatbelts, toys. I mean, anything that's harmful for children, immediately we have regulations. And yet not since 1996 has there been any legislation regulating the internet and, online. And social media didn't even exist. There wasn't even a notion or a thought at that point.
Right. And it's profits at the cost of our children.
Definitely, because the more people they have on their platforms, the more money they make, and the algorithms are pushing it to these kids. Kids are not even looking it up. Maybe they look up, I want to do some more exercise, and that kind of morphs into body image stuff and eating issue stuff. And like the 500 calorie a day, the way you can look like me, and then the way the body are been morphed by these filters that they have on these systems to make them look different and perfect. I mean, it's a bad spiral. It's a bad spiral. What can happen?
Well, what happened to your daughter is absolutely horrific. I mean, I cannot imagine that she was found in this older man's home and all of this stuff. And
no, it was really, and you know what, Angela, it took me a long time to be able to say that. There's so much stigma, attached to this. Maybe I thought I was a bad parent. I was a single mom. I'm afraid to say that sometimes because people will think, oh, well, of course, she's a single mom. That's why it happened. She probably wasn't, around enough, and it's so unfair. And it really affected me. And I could barely even say it was fentanyl in the beginning.
Right.
And so it took me a long time to get okay with that.
Your 17-year-old, barely 17-year-old girl was a victim. I mean, that's the thing. And we blame the victim and the victim's parents. Did she make a choice that you wish she wouldn't have made? Yes, of course. Yes. But kids are impulsive. They don't understand how the world works. She didn't know what she was getting into. She certainly didn't deserve anything that happened to her. And you didn't deserve for this to happen to your child.
Thank you. Of course not. I mean, I did everything I could, but there's some things we just don't know. You know what I mean?
Right, I do.
Now I know more than I knew then. You look back and you go, I wish I could have done X or I should have done Y. It's impossible, as you know, to figure out what would have been the path that wouldn't had this ending. But parents, that's what we do because we just want to do the best job and love our kids. Right. And this type of thing is making it so difficult for parents to parent and not be a police officer in your own home.
And her death should not be in vain. It should lead to changes in the way social media companies attract and have children on their platforms, changes in what they have to report. And it should lead to those changes. The deaths of all of these kids should lead to huge cultural changes. And the fact that money speaks louder than the deaths of our children is absolutely disgusting. And it makes me really want to throw up.
Exactly. And that's why the onus is on Congress. Obviously, these companies are not going to do it themselves. Congress does have the ability to put, that's what they do, regulation. I know a lot of people are not, happy about a lot of regulation, but there needs to be some regulation or this type of stuff happens if you just let it go. So that's why it's up to Congress to really look at this bill. I know they want to, but they can't come together and figure it out. And I don't know if that's because of the lobbies and they're getting so much money. They're so bombarded with all of this that these tech companies have become so powerful. I mean, now we have a tech company executive basically leading our country in a way or co-leading our country. I don't know what that's going to do to these issues because I don't know about him per se, but I know Zuckerberg and others really don't want to have this legislation. And they will do anything in their power to not have it pass. Yet they say, oh, we're doing this and we came up with Instagram team. Those are really empty things that they're doing because when you're a parent and you see actually how they're working, they're not meaningful. You know what I mean? And parents don't have enough meaningful tools. I put time limits. I did all of that. I did all the checking her content, all of that.
Yep. I had an app where I tracked my daughter's online, activities and texts and everything. I was like a cop. You have to be like a cop and parents shouldn't have to be like a cop.
No. And it causes a lot of agita and lot of arguments and disagreements in the home. And I think a lot of parents are struggling between, being a cop and not giving your child any freedom to explore the world and learn from themselves, because that's not right either. So it's really unfair. I think it's really unfair.
Yeah, it is. And I want to end with this question, Juliana, about your grief. And it's been 3 years and, the loss of a child in this way and the fighting that you've been doing, it's constantly, are you able to find some peace, or how is your grief today?
It's interesting. I've questioned myself many times if this line of work or this advocacy work that I'm doing is healthy for me. Is it keeping it front and center? And, I have to say I had a lot of trauma after everything happened, and I still do have a lot of trauma. I've thought about that a lot. I'm getting more involved in education and other things that I have more control over, because it is really hard when you work so hard and then other people don't do what they're supposed to do or what they said they would do. So really getting more into that and all the issues that go into this, which is the mental health of our youth, the social media use as well, that's exacerbating that, and that's why kids go and they self-medicate, So we really have a lot of other issues that play into this that are really front and center that I'd like to address and help young people navigate through so they don't end up with the same, outcome. For me, everything's different with grief, right? Different people respond to different things. Like some parents open a nonprofit immediately after their child died because that was the way for them to heal. I didn't have that. I didn't know. I was too broken to put two and two together. And for me, my biggest healing is quiet time. It's long, long walks. I mean, I must have walked miles and miles and miles in nature. It's meditation for me has really helped quiet my mind and given me more of a connection to my daughter and her where she is now, not here with us. So those kind of things have given me a little bit of, solace in all of this. And this work that I do, just because also we do it with a group of parents that we have all lost children, that's very meaningful too. We know we have each other. And we don't do it because we want to. We do it because we don't want other kids dying.
Right.
We just can't live with ourselves if this is just going on and on and on. And why should it have to be the parents to have to be the ones to do this?
Exactly.
Instead of our lawmakers, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yes.
That's kind of it for me. I have moments, the times that are really hard. We just had Coco would have had her 20th birthday on February 13th. Holidays are hard. It's hard, but doing this work in some way, even though it's hard, does help because I know hopefully I'm helping, another family not to have to go through the immense pain that you and I have endured and our families have endured with the loss of our children.
Right. We're all in this together, and that's why we're all in it too. So I appreciate all the efforts that you have done, and thank you so much for sharing about what happened to Coco, and my heart goes out to you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I appreciate being here and being able to tell this story.
And thank you for listening to Grieving Out Loud. You can find more episodes, read the latest news headlines surrounding the fentanyl epidemic, and hear about our K-12 substance use prevention curriculum on our website, emily'shope.charity. We posted a link in the show notes of this episode. And while you're there, we'd also appreciate it if you take a moment to rate and review this episode and share it with your friends and family. It truly helps further our mission to raise awareness about the nation's drug crisis while decreasing the stigma associated with addiction, and therefore getting people the help they so desperately need. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Marley Miller. Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K-12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe.